o'clock. I'll call the meeting to order. Good evening, Exeter. Good evening, colleagues on the board, respective town staff. Good evening to those folks that are attending here in person, live from the Novak room after 15 months of Zoom meetings, and it's really great to be back. Good evening to all you folks watching at home. We'll start off. We don't have to do any roll calls anymore, so we're back to normal, at least on how we're running a meeting. So I'll introduce the board at this time. To my right, Selectwoman Levy Roundtree Olaf. Good evening. The Vice Chair, Selectwoman Molly Cowan. Good evening.
Hi, everyone.
To my left, we have the Clerk, Selectwoman Julie Gilman.
Good evening.
Good evening. Selectman Darrell Brown. Good evening.
Good evening.
And all the way to my left is Town Manager Russ Dean. My name is Nico Papakostandis. Before we jump into public comment, again, I want to recognize that we are back in the Novak room after 15 months. And I just wanted to take a quick second to thank the staff, particularly Mr. Dean, all the department heads, staff that have hung in there and were patient with us through Zoom meetings. I'd also like to thank, in particular, the IT department, Andy Swanson, all of the staff that helped all of the boards and committees with their Zoom meetings. I'd like to thank all of the boards and committees for their patience and their cooperation through the 15 months of running meetings virtually. And I would be completely remiss if I didn't acknowledge specifically Bob Glowacki and all of the hard work. It just seemed like no matter what time of day or what meeting it is, Bob was there helping out. And last but not least, I'd like to thank you, the public, the citizens of Exeter, for your patience through the 15 months that we had to meet virtually. It's great to be back, and hopefully we'll see more of you in attendance. Tonight we're going to talk about how we're going to continue meetings, perhaps in a hybrid method for those that can't get down to the Novak room. We'll get into that later in the agenda, but on behalf of the board, I just want to thank everybody for everything that you've done over the last 15 months, and it's good to be back. So we'll open it up to public comment right now. This is an opportunity for the public to weigh in with comment to the board. If any of your comments are relative to an agenda item, we do ask that you wait till that agenda item comes up. I'll pause for a moment, and I don't see any members of the public, so we'll move on. There are no proclamations or recognitions this evening, so we'll jump into the minutes. And if there are no revisions or amendments to the regular Exeter Select Board meeting minutes of June 7, 2021, I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. That's going to take some getting used to again.
Voice
Okay.
books.
We do not have any appointments this evening. However, we do have a resignation from Carlos Guindon from the Conservation Commission. Carlos is relocating and has submitted his letter of resignation. So at this point, I would entertain a motion to approve Carlos's letter of resignation.
I regretfully have to make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Carlos, thank you for your work on the Conservation Commission. Carlos is moving on, and we wish him all the best. Okay, we will now jump into our discussion and action items. The first of which is the Swayze Parkway road closure. As we know, the last motion was made to extend the closure of the road through June 30th, 2021. And I know that we have another meeting before then, but I wanted to discuss that this evening. I spoke with the chair of the Swayze Park trustees last week, and we had a long talk about the parkway in general. The trustees are due to meet later this month, and they have accepted an invitation to come before the select board in July. And we agreed that if the board wanted to discuss perhaps we could extend the road closure through the end of July, July 31st, to allow the trustees time to discuss it amongst themselves and then bring it before the board for discussion. So I'll open it up to the select board for any discussion, or if the board is inclined to make a motion to extend the road closure through July 31st, 2021.
Just a question. What's in our authority? How far can we extend it now?
Mr. Dean, I know we had initially closed it due to the emergency order. Obviously, the emergency order was lifted. Legally, can we extend it for another month, or?
I think you can probably extend it for another month. I think once we need to review the trust again, and the trust does say that there needs to be a parkway open to vehicular traffic. So I think you're okay for a month, but we need to come back to it.
No, absolutely. And again, the trustees are in favor of extending it just so that they can meet, have their discussion, and then bring it before the board. So
I have had some people contact me about somehow opening it at least partially to vehicles because older folks would like to be able to drive downtown and then go for a walk, which they were used to doing before we had to shut it down to make it healthy
Right.
walking. So that's something to consider before we make a final decision.
no, and I think since the closure, 14, 15 months ago, we've received correspondence pretty much throughout that time period, both pro keeping the road closed and some asking that it be reopened. And I do acknowledge that we have received correspondence from the board. Again, I think the only reason that I would ask to consider that is, again, to allow the trustees to meet, come before the select board, and maybe take everything into consideration. But certainly, Mr. Dean, if you feel that maybe we need to speak with Attorney Mitchell and bring it back up next week, I don't know if that would be prudent. We have time, because it's...
We do. We do have time.
Then I think taking that into consideration, why don't we, off this evening, we can bring it back next Monday after speaking with Attorney Mitchell.
Okay.
Is the board in agreement with that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. Our next agenda item is an update from Fire Chief Wilking and Assistant Chief Pizon on the fire alarm box that I think you came before us last year with, or the year before.
It's been a while.
Okay.
First, I want to say thank you, and it was brought to my attention during our town meeting that we held in deliberative session that I had never officially met many of the board members, so congratulations to both on your election. It has been an interesting year, and we now get to meet face to face for the first time, and I'm sure eventually we'll shake hands and do the pleasantries, but it's my pleasure to serve you as your fire chief. And just a quick chat about where we are with the fire alarm box program. With all of the COVID issues, with my duties as emergency management director and working directly with you and keeping the town safe, I asked Assistant Chief Pizon to step in and kind of manage that whole process. And he has been working day to day with Deputy Chief Jason Fritz. I'd like to introduce Jason Fritz because some of you have not seen him face to face either. He is the town's fire inspector. He took Jason Green's place when Jason asked to return to the floor as a shift lieutenant. So you've met Justin before, and Jason. I would like to have them present where they are, what their feeling is, and at the end of the presentation, if there's still questions, we'd be more than happy to work them through and answer anything you have. So without any further ado, Jason.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Nice to meet everybody.
Nice to meet you.
Just as a quick overview and update to where we are, back in December, you folks received our customers received a letter from the chief regarding the decommissioning of our fire alarm system. In January, when I took my position, I was given the project to take on, and we started working with our customers out in the public for that. The phase out started in January and is expected to wrap up the 1st of July. That was the deadline we had set, just to give it a starting and an ending. The fire alarm division has rolled back our municipal fire alarm system to roughly within the town compact. Starting in May any customer that hadn't already reached out to us, that had already gotten off of our fire alarm system, I began making phone calls and touching base to see how they're making out in the transition, seeing if they need any guidance or anything like that. We had contacted our Primex attorney to check for content and time frame of the letter that we had sent out, and he agreed that what we had put out was appropriate. So again, we just touched base with the customers that were on our contact list. So I'll actually let Justin speak to the budgetary items of that, because he's the one who formulated that stuff there. So,
Can you just explain for
Sure.
me and for people who might not understand, what are you talking about when you say on your system?
so currently, right now, any business or entity in town that has a monitored fire alarm system, sprinkler system, fire alarms, smoke detection, that kind of thing, their system will communicate with the fire station to our dispatch center. Our dispatchers will dispatch it appropriately. So as we are getting out of that business, they'll be required to put in the appropriate equipment to send that same signal to a third-party monitoring service.
I see. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, everybody. Justin Pizon, Assistant Fire Chief. So when we first set out the letter, and I think contacted Mr. Dean regarding the decommissioning, we came up with some preliminary budgetary items that would have been a reduction both in overtime and supplies. And our projection early on was a reduction of total over the course of 2 years, because we split half of our overtime reduction this year was $10,000. The other half will be next year, but we have some supplies we also reduced. So we anticipated a $38,846 reduction in our fire department budget. To put in perspective, this past year, we brought in about $31,500 in revenue. That revenue does also include permits. So I don't have that broken down. Permits are relatively inexpensive, so I have to assume that the large portion of that came from fire alarm monitoring fees. But we did actually, were able to, in the 2021 budget was a reduction of $27,902. And in the 22, we'll have a total of another $14,000 to bring it to a total of $41,978 will be the reduction. So it easily can be seen as a $10,000 roughly difference between what we brought in and what we expensed.
So that 31 was new, the 31K was recurring or new revenue?
So 31.5 would be considered anticipated revenue.
From monitoring?
It is for monitoring. So we charge, so you'll see the different, see there's two different systems. We run a radio box system that has a radio antenna, probably not seen by a lot of people. It's kind of hidden in a spot. It sends a signal to the fire department through frequency. But you also see the red boxes that you used to see on poles in town. A lot of businesses have those what are called master boxes. Those master boxes where customers are charged $300 a year for monitoring fees, and the radio boxes were $80.
And that fee will go, that revenue will go away.
It will go away.
Starting
correct.
July.
Yeah, and actually this year, we were asked about tax rebates of some sort through a couple of people, and I'll say this year we didn't charge anybody for the monitoring fees, knowing that we were going to phase things out. So I kind of looked at like we gave a rebate this year and that there's no, we didn't charge anybody. And I know we have a July 1st deadline, but I've been pretty clear and transparent that my intention is not to unplug the system on July 1st and leave people hanging that might be still out there. Jason has done a ton of work doing follow-up phone calls with everybody. So if we have not received a phone call or done an acceptance test, which we don't charge for, which is an acceptance test is simply we go out, we pull a pull station near the door and make sure the alarm company actually calls the fire station the way we expect them to. So we don't charge for that. And yeah, we're in a good position. I think we're running down to, we've got over 50 completed. We're still transitioning, but having that face-to-face contact and conversations has gone a long way. And I think that us working one-on-one with individuals, which we're happy to do, people feel as though they're lost, they have questions. We've maintained a vendor list. Initially, it started out kind of small. We didn't know all the appropriate players, but over time, that has grown to probably 15 or so different vendors that are out there that will service the town of Exeter that are open for business that anybody can contact. And I'm saying this now because I want people to contact us if they're stuck. Like, I don't know where to go. I've been using you for I think I mentioned it's 1852 technology that we're still embracing here, so people have been using it for a really long time. So I think it would be, we're here as a resource, and I ask people to reach out and let us help you work through this process if they feel as though they're stuck.
Are you able to identify people that we could reach out to? I know you're asking people to reach out to you, but can we, reach out to others, or is that?
I don't know. I mean, we have a customer list that our now retired office manager used for our annual billing. That's what we're using. I think at this point we've made contact. We have contacted every single person that we haven't heard from.
Okay.
So now it's follow-up phone calls,
Okay.
making sure things are progressing in a way. But no, I think we're in pretty good shape. I don't see us stopping on July 1st. I think that's based on where we are right now. Probably not going to happen with some customers, so we're going to leave it until that last customer is off the system, or we have some catastrophic event take place and it's out of service. We will continue to monitor going forward.
Okay. And the reduction in expenses, does that include man hours or overtime?
It does.
Okay.
I believe about $20,000 of that reduction was overtime.
Okay.
Yeah.
What they're about. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, so the 15, the third-party vendors, do they overlap? So is it a situation where your zone only has these two options, or your zone has one option?
No, so in our area, I don't want to get into so many details, but there's only UL Underwriter Laboratories. They certify these or credential these monitoring facilities, and there's not a lot of them out there. So you'll find that, for example, I know of one of the central station monitoring companies is used by 6 different vendors. So your service provider is Acme Fire Protection. They come out, they do an install. They will help coordinate when they do the works to get it to the right central station, and that's something that's going to be. It's going to be behind the scenes for a customer. They're not going to be aware of that. Just as we have vetted everybody that will be using in town to make sure they're going to the right place. That was part of our struggle, is trying to maintain to meet a certain standard, and it was part of the reason why we're getting out of this is we've lost the expertise and we just don't have the resources available to manage a system that, quite honestly, covered most of the town. And so you can imagine anytime you lost power, probably one of our lines went down with that power line, and that requires our crews to get in a bucket truck and make repairs to that hardwired system.
Okay. Wow, thanks. I had one more question.
Sure.
I lost it. It's okay. So the people have basically had 6 months of free
They
monitoring.
did. Yep.
And then you're saying you won't cut it off right away. So it's pretty much this year will be a wash for the town, but people will have safety. They'll safely transition to something.
They will. And that because the last billing was done in 2020.
Okay.
So when I sent the letter out in 2020, we'd already received, our annual billing goes out in like January. Okay. So I made the assumption that come December, what we had received was what we were going to receive for the year.
Got it.
And that's where that 31.5 came from. That was our revenue that we had gained throughout 2020.
Okay. Got it.
But yes, we're not going to leave anybody hanging,
Okay.
for sure.
Good. Okay. Any other questions? Great. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on, we have next the board and committee meetings discussion. As we know, the Governor's Emergency Order number 12, which authorized public bodies to meet without a physical location, expired last Friday. So now all boards and committees will need to meet in person. The land use boards, the zoning board of adjustment, and also the planning board had to reschedule several of their meetings because notice had already gone out indicating that meetings would be held virtually. And so now everybody will need to be re-noted that the meetings will be live. However, all of the other boards and committees can start to meet in person here in the Novak Room or wherever it is that they met on town office location, or I think in the rec department, their advisory committee meets over there. But Mr. Dean and I discussed how we could continue to include folks that that cannot make it down to the Novak room. I think that was one of the, if you could say there's a positive from a pandemic, one of the positives was we did have increased participation in most meetings, but particularly the select board meetings. So we're looking at trying to find a hybrid manner to conduct our meetings so that we can have folks come in physically to the Novak room and also have folks online if they wish to participate with questions or discussion. We discussed perhaps having the select board be the first board or committee to test it out and to see how it works. And in the meantime, we'll reach out to, I think, to start, Mr. Dean, the land use board chairs and ask whether or not they want to consider a hybrid, and then from there we can reach out to the committees. But we'll start here at the select board and see how it works. I know it was the select board that had to work out some of the bugs initially with the Zoom 15 months ago. So we've asked Andy Swanson and Bob Glowacki tonight to kind of run us through just what they have discovered initially of how we can make this work, and then go from there and try to perfect it. So Bob, I think you're presenting?
Sure, yeah. So while the projector's getting warmed up, basically it would work the same way as your meetings were working virtually. Just think of all these microphones and all these cameras as the webcam and mic feeding that computer over there, which is the Novak room, and that joins the Zoom meeting. And then everyone else who's at home can join it. So I'm gonna pop downstairs just so you can see what it would be like, and I'll join you guys virtually.
Okay.
So, testing. You can see me now, running down the stairs.
Be careful, Bob.
You're making me dizzy.
So you guys will be able to see me.
Ruh-roh.
Oh, there he is.
So it's pretty seamless, and I think it's easy to set up for most of the boards. We do only have this capability in the Novak room, unfortunately.
Okay.
Just because it relies on our TV equipment. But the only thing different is, Mr. Chair, you would have in front of you Zoom so you can see who's raising their hands.
Okay.
But just how in the past you would, look at that and then ask our staff who's behind the scenes there, behind you, they would unmute whoever is wishing to speak in the public. And if they're an attendee, you just see their name across the screen. And if, they're as a panelist, whether it's a town staff who wants to call in, or maybe if it was a land use board, an architect who couldn't be there in person, they'd be on video just like this, and they can also share screens from here and do PowerPoint presentations and everything. So, it could be a great option for some of the land use boards for people who, want to save time with their architects and town staff as well, who maybe only need to be there for one part of the agenda and could just Zoom in from home. So, saving that fuel and time and all that. And it's fairly simple. So I don't know if you guys have any questions about it.
I have a couple of questions, Mr. Chair. As in when we were doing the Zoom meetings, if somebody was calling in by phone, just their phone number would show up, and that would be the same thing here because they wouldn't have a picture?
Yep, same thing here. And what I tried to have my staff do in the fully Zoom meetings was after they spoke, rename their phone number with their name if possible. That way the public at home is not seeing their phone number, but unfortunately that's the way Zoom works, so it has to show something of their phone number.
And then the other question is about personnel. And when we're operating virtually, our personnel could be anywhere. And will having the meetings here in the Novak room create, more of a job function for somebody or somebodies?
Not really. I mean, if we're behind the scenes there in the IT office running the meeting, this just adds a couple extra steps that I've outlined in some instructions for my staff to follow. And it's something I'm going to help get set up before I leave for the day and things like that. But it more is requiring the Novak room and the equipment that's in there. So we won't be able to replicate it elsewhere in the same fashion. There were some talks that maybe we could set up just a simple laptop, maybe in the wheelwright room that even the chair or something of one of the smaller committees could just turn on and allow the public to join that way. But if you'd like the TV staff to help run them, I think it's best to keep them in the Novak room, and we could offer it for any of the meetings that we're filming, just like we were with Zoom.
Okay, now how do we turn your volume up?
So if you want to turn the volume up, Andy is right there, and he has that speaker there.
There
You
you
can just
go.
turn the speaker volume of the computer up. Would be the best thing there. We had to set it at a certain volume so it doesn't feed back into the microphones, but we're still experimenting with that. So we could always just pop out from the IT office and turn it up a little bit if you guys are having trouble hearing the person on Zoom.
Great.
I have a question. How many of these committees were televised before? I know not all of them were, but it makes
Sure.
sense to prioritize the ones that were before, like the land use boards, et cetera.
Yeah, so I looking at all the data that I saw, I think we were doing like between 11 and 15 meetings per month. 15 being like a high level, if they were like budget meetings and other, kind of the seasonal meetings. But we doubled to now it's like 18 to 24 per month, because every single Zoom, except like the technical review committee, maybe E911. If we were doing the Zoom, we thought it was worth it to just film it and put it on TV. So pretty much every board, if we were doing the Zoom for it, if they were meeting virtually, we had it on TV. So half of the things that were meeting virtually, we never filmed before.
Bob, how much of a bandwidth would you have to increase, like if you were doing 12 to 15 pre-COVID, understanding that your resources are limited, particularly with personnel, would we be able to increase the number of committees? Because I think over the course of the last year, some folks got accustomed to watching some of these on TV. I mean, it was, and I know, speaking personally for me, I could put a committee meeting on in the background while I worked. I understand you can't do them all, but would we be able to increase, or would that require additional staff?
I think there's going to be somewhere in between what we used to do and what we're doing now. And I think in the short term, we're having a little bit of staffing issues that I think we'll be able to fix. The long-term issue is that this hybrid option is pretty much only available in the Novak room. So
Right.
some Tuesdays and Thursdays, we were able to do 2 different Zooms with 4 different employees. To doing it to channel 98, to working on a meeting on channel 22. Now we don't have that capability because of space and equipment. So that would require just one of those meetings meeting. So for example, in July, the HDC and the planning board are on the same day. So we're just doing the planning board.
Yeah.
Unless the HDC wanted to meet on a Wednesday or Friday night or something like that. Because Tuesdays and Thursdays are often really busy. And the new Arts and Culture Commission usually meets on the same nights as a couple other boards. So it may require the boards to rearrange when they meet if they want to have the TV coverage.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else?
I had a question for Selectwoman Gilman. Did you mention that things were happening in Concord as far as hybrid and statutory stuff there?
Yes, it was very similar to this, except for, actually, I never went to Concord to see the TV, so I'm not sure what it looked like from the room that they were sitting in. But from my end of the Zoom, you didn't see anybody's face, you just saw their name or their phone number. And I have to say, this is like the best the best example I've seen of trying it for the first time. We had, in my committee, I don't know how many meetings where we had the feedback from the microphones in the room and the microphone on the computer that was operating the TV screen. So
Oh, I thought there
sounds
were the
better.
policy discussions about allowing towns to do.
yes, but it turned into a study committee and we haven't finalized that one yet.
Okay, so in lieu of that, are we restricted from doing what we're doing now?
Yes, we are back to the old ways. Adding the hybrid is not unallowed or disallowed.
But having 100%.
But we have to be here in the room that's posted on the notice. A majority of us do. We can still have somebody remote if you'd like, but a majority of us have to be in the physical space.
And the land, which applies to land use as well. Yeah.
Bob, back to the hybrid meeting, let's say for the select board. On the agenda, will we be posting instructions for folks at home that wish to call in or Zoom in? Or how will that work?
Yeah, we would try and make it clear. It would basically be the same thing you see or you saw it previously. I think it would be important to stress at the top, we're back in person. And then, if you wish to attend virtually, see the bottom of the agenda for access information there. And then it would basically be the same thing you see before, where we kind of push them to the TV channel if they want to watch the meeting, which I think has grown our views. And then if they actually want to participate, then it has the click here to join the Zoom. If you're calling in with a phone, here's the instructions for that. Raise your hand, all of that stuff, and the number to call for technical difficulties and the email address. So
Okay.
Because that was used quite a bit in the first couple months.
Yes, I remember. So, Mr. Dean, I think it's important that we include the instructions for folks at home, because I know that was one of the biggest obstacles we had in the beginning was individuals expressed that they weren't quite sure how to get on. So if they are calling or participating from home, we'd like to make it easier.
Sure. So noted.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for Andy or Bob? So can we try this next week?
Yeah.
Or is that too soon?
Yeah, I
Next week?
think we're ready for it, and I think it just for our planning sake, the same thing will, if you guys have guest panelists that we're going to be virtually attending, we will send their invites in advance. If you'd like, we can just continue sending them to all the board members, just in case one of you can't make it or plans to attend. But I'll leave the questions of how many of the board members have to be there in person and those things to you guys, as I'm not sure how that all legally works out. But technically speaking, we can send invites to whoever need them to attend virtually. So we're happy to offer that if we're going to be in the Novak room.
We might want to ask current chairs, or maybe just give them a handout. I don't know how comfortable some of them were with doing the Zoom, watching the participants and making sure that everybody was heard. So we might need a little training on that with current chairs anyway.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, we can maybe work on some sort of thing. If Nico were to look under the laptop that's in front of him, we had instructions for other stuff there, so we can maybe just have kind of a printout, and we're going to leave that laptop set up so that chairs don't have to bring in their own equipment to join the Zoom from that. We'll have my staff set up the Zoom already on that computer, so it'll already be ready to go. And all they have to do is what they've been doing for the last years is watching that for any hands raised. And my staff can also talk to you by popping out, or they can speak to you via microphone from the control room and let you know if you missed somebody in the queue or something like that. So we're happy to do that as well.
Does it have to be the chair that operates the Zoom?
Could be the clerk.
I don't think so. It could be anyone. I guess in terms of our staff, I'd like to just know where the chair, where that person's going to be, because as you can see right now, it's taped in there. So I'd have to set that up ahead of time. So for us, time saving measure, it'd be great if it's just one seat on that table is the person who does it every time. So we don't have to be moving it every meeting.
Okay.
Well, and I also think that the chair could sit here and the person monitoring, I don't know that this is the chair's, maybe other people feel differently, but I don't know. I can think of one board that I serve on where the chair would certainly appreciate having somebody else mind the Zoom attendees and probably wouldn't mind sitting here so that this doesn't have to be we don't have to.
Yeah, and I'll just add as well, if there was a certain chair who they want to wash their hands clean a Zoom, we're happy to just let that committee know if someone has their hands raised, because we can do that from behind the scenes. We can just unmute a microphone back there and talk to you guys through the PA system in there and say, John Doe is on Zoom with his hand raised. Similar to what we did at the deliberative session. where the town moderator asked, "Hey, is there anyone outside in the parking lot?" And then someone there says, "Yep, we have so and so here," and so we could assist that way too. That'd be no problem.
So I think, and Mr. Dean, I'll have this conversation, maybe you can help me out, but obviously offering the Zoom hybrid to folks to participate in the meetings, I think it would be a positive thing, but if we're going back to the emergency orders lifted and we're going back to normal, I mean, under 91A, it's pretty specific when it describes the physical quorum, defining emergency. So, I mean, is it not our expectation that the board and committee members will be in person unless there's, an emergency situation?
Oh, yes, unless there's an emergency, that would be the expectation.
So I think we need to make that clear to our committee and board chairs that, unless there's extenuating circumstances, that the members need to be back in physical person.
And the law says that there needs to be a physical quorum, like Julie pointed out, and people can participate electronically, but only if it's out of necessity that they can't be in the physical location. Mm-hmm. So the law is pretty clear on that.
Okay.
So we'll make that clear to people.
And presumably we're going to reach out to committee and board chairs this week.
Yes, we wanted to have this meeting here tonight, and then we'll follow up with them tomorrow.
Terrific. Okay. Any other questions?
I had one more comment about, so when you mentioned back to normal, so it may be back to normal for the board, for the committee members themselves, but I think it'd be wise to take this, once we get over the technology hurdle, to think about 2020 as sort of a training for what's ideal for the public. And so accessibility is great, but also treating it as a drill for, we enter the winter again, and we could be in a situation where you want people to be, remote, public versus committee. So I think it's a great idea once we get past the technology spread to also just say, here's a great way to participate, for the public.
That's,
go ahead. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But that Selectman Brown just reminded me of an aspect of Zoom that is used by at least the Conservation Commission and the HDC, where the people who are presenting share their screen. And it would be lovely if we could do it on as big a screen as that, because the people at home weren't seeing what we were seeing.
Yeah, so that's totally possible. I'm just zooming you from my smartphone here. So if I had a laptop and shared screen, you would see that on the big screen, and I could see a lot of the land use boards. Maybe the applicants may be there in person, but maybe they have their architect or so and so zoom in to save time. That's totally an option. But if someone brought in, what we used to do, just bring in a flash drive, pop in the PowerPoint. And do that. I definitely got a lot of positive feedback, and I've heard the same thing in other communities that for those, it's much better than a camera zooming in on a poster board on an easel for the people back at home and even the board members themselves to be able to see. So that could be something to work into the information you send to applicants, saying, could you include a digital copy in your application or things like that.
Actually, I think those are already required for land use boards anyway. We just don't disseminate them that way. Excuse me. Or we do.
Yeah, but technically how it would work, we would just, someone, maybe my staff could just pop out. We would just minimize the Zoom here. If they were in person with a PowerPoint, bring that up. I'd still be here in the background. I wouldn't go away. And then when we're ready to do public comment or whatever, minimize the PowerPoint and bring the Zoom back up. So that would be no problem.
Andy?
So there's one thing I want to bring up about the big screen. People watching on channel 22 or in standard def, all those letters look like little gray blurs to them. That's all they'll ever see if it's numbers and letters and that kind of stuff. Tell us we can get a better deal out of Comcast.
So are you saying if we wanted to project a plan, a site plan on the TV, it probably wouldn't make any difference in how well somebody.
The pictures might be okay, but if there's any lettering on there, or if they bring up a spreadsheet or something. I watch it a lot from home, and I usually have 22, and lately I've had Zoom side by side, and 22 is basically illegible if it's just plain paper
I'll just
data.
jump in there, if I may, that while that may be true, most of the people I think are watching video on demand, Facebook or YouTube, and that is recorded in high definition. And while it may be hard to read, it's definitely better than when people bring in a physical copy and we're zooming into it, which is what we used to do in the past. So I would highly encourage digital copies if possible for the viewers at home.
Very good.
Bob, would it be helpful? Go ahead.
If I may, I just have one other thing. The only thing that is odd right now with the way this works is right now while I'm talking, I'm seeing myself. And that's because think of that screen that you're looking at right now as camera number 5. So we're sending to the people at Zoom whatever we're sending to channel 22. So in order to have me on the channel, we're sending me to myself. So it may be a bit off-putting for the people who are talking for a little bit, because it looks like they're talking to themselves. But as soon as you guys start talking, I start to see you guys again. So
Okay.
That's just a little note there.
Bob, would it be helpful to you if we recruit some volunteers for next Monday? If we're gonna.
I think at this time it's not necessary. We will have the 2 staff people behind the scenes there. And the only time I think you would ever need to adjust something is, I'm guessing Andy maybe turned up the volume there if I was a little low. But
Oh, no. I meant volunteers from the public to raise their hand so we could test this out.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Okay.
We'd be happy to. So if people wanted to go to the Minutes and Agendas page, find the Select Board meeting, join us attendee next Select Board, they can say hi during public comment so we can test that out. That'd be great.
Are there any volunteers from the physical public tonight?
There, great, Justin's going to do it.
Not to put any of you on the spot, but
You can't hear me, right?
I can sort of hear you. What did you say, Justin?
Next week? We talking next week?
Monday night.
All right.
We're meeting next Monday.
COVID report next week.
Hey.
All right. Any other questions? Well, we'll look forward to that. It should be exciting. And again, Bob,
Sounds good.
thanks for everything you've done in the background.
No problem. Thank you for your time.
Good. Thank you, Andy. Okay, moving on. We're going to continue our discussion on the classification plan amendment, Assistant Town Manager, HR Director. Selectwoman Rountree, we had a conversation last week. We started off the meeting by saying we weren't going to consider any votes because we wanted a full board here. So obviously want to give you an opportunity to speak to this or ask any questions. Mr. Dean, do you want to give a quick summary?
Sure. This proposal we would amend our classification plan to delete the Human Resources Director job title from grade 11 and add a Human Resources Director / Assistant Town Manager position to grade 13. There was a memo in your packet dated June 7th that gave a brief overview. I included 5 things in that memo that I felt that this position would give to the town. It's probably a short list. There are probably more things that it would help add to the town organization, but one of the big things is obviously creation of a second in command when the town manager is absent. So among other things, we're looking to shore up that part of the organization, and therefore we've made the proposal to basically fuse the Human Resources Director with the Assistant Town Manager. The other thing I just point out that in the research and the due diligence that we did on this, we found probably 8 to 10 communities in New Hampshire that had this position already. That included towns as diverse as Rye, I think Atkinson on the small side, but also Claremont, Lebanon had similar positions as well. So that's the proposal.
And again, this is consistent to a discussion we started April 19th during our goal-setting session, where we looked at the organization as a whole and decided that we needed to look at alignment. It also corresponds with the announcement of the retirement of the Human Resources Director. This would give the town an opportunity again to merge the two positions. We also have the Assistant Human Resources employee. We were missing somebody in that role for quite some time, and we hired somebody, I believe, at the beginning of April. This would allow the organization the opportunity of having a neutral role in the town manager's position should the town manager be out either expectedly or unexpectedly. It is not creating a new position per se. It's not adding money to the budget, which is why it's not something that I think needs to go before the Budget Recommendations Committee. It's consistent with what we've done within the police department, the fire department, also the DPW. It's within the purview of the town manager and the select board under RSA 37. So I guess before we open it up to the public, Selectwoman Rountree-Olaf, did you have any comments since you weren't here the last meeting?
No comments.
Selectwoman Cowan? No. Selectwoman Gilman?
I think you covered everything.
Okay. And Selectman Brown?
Not yet, nope.
Okay. So at this time, we'll open it up to the public.
We're debating. Good evening, and thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a little bit, seems like old times already. We're back here. That's good. I'm not opposed to the position itself, but I have, and I've spoken a couple of times, so I'm trying to keep my comments short. However, I'm Bill Campbell, 111 High Street. Sorry about that. I should remember the protocol. But however, I have a couple of questions concerning this new position. We now have a full-time HR director with a fully defined set of responsibilities. I wonder, how can we add significant duties to this person's job description, which increases their workload? Does this excess now go to the part-time person? And if so, does that person now or next year become full-time? There's a certain load that the person has, you're adding more to it, and either the person works a 60-hour week or somebody has to pick up the slack. And we're saying it's not increasing the budget, but in past experiences, things that have been kind of okay the first year, come back the next year and say, we really need somebody now to fill in because we've got too much to do. So I'm worried about that. Second, you have slotted this position at step 13, up from step 11. Should someone get positioned that high up without a thorough review? One of the people recently slotted at that step was the Economic Development Director. Some of you may not have been around when we established that position, but it took much discussion. People asked, do we need this? Should we have this position combined with the town planner? Should it be part-time? What should this person's duties be? It took a while to work through all these concerns and establish the position we now have. Now we want to insert someone at this high level without going through what I always thought was the town's policy of running such an important position through the BRC. Third, it is said that this has been the selectmen's agenda for several times. Of the 10,000 or so voters at the town, I wonder how many actually read the agenda before each meeting. I try, but obviously I've missed a few. My sense has been my sense after being a selectman is that people vote people into that office and then depend on them to run the overall operation of the town without being concerned each week. I know the board can become insular. Ours did at times. However, one set of eyes that tended to keep us in check on things was the BRC. What is the rush in establishing this position this week? If the town manager had to take another leave in the future, we have a system that worked the first time and could be called on again. Let's take the time to get this right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell.
Good evening, Select Board. My name is Ann Sorman. I'm at 14 Cullen Way. I really can't say anything any better than Mr. Campbell. A lot of what he said I agree with. But I also hope that when I'm done, you'll answer his questions and answer mine. Because I hear that the word research and due diligence that was done, but when I'm hearing that, what's being said is that 15 other towns have one of these. That's fine for those towns. What I'm looking for are what are the duties that are not being done that require us to have a full-time assistant town manager / HR director. So the duties, and again, this goes back to what Mr. Campbell mentioned in terms of due diligence on the same kind of discussion we had when we did hire the economic development director. In fact, it's the same kind of discussion we had probably 15 years ago when we did the IT director, Mr. Swanson's job for the very first time. There was a lot of discussion through Budget Committee at that time. So I think that's what we're looking for, is the same type of due diligence. It does look like on May 24th, I think if a few of us hadn't spoken, it did look, at least through Zoom, that the board was prepared to vote that night. And you might have. And that would have really been a huge disservice, because at least we're having this discussion, and even you all have said you were glad we had this discussion. But we wouldn't have if those of us that happened to see the agenda and happened to look at the packet. It was not the agenda. It was the packet that actually said that there was going to be a discussion about an assistant town manager and an HR director. It was not on the agenda. And a lot of folks just look at the agenda when they look at the website. So that... it looks like, again, this is perception, it appears that the board simply wants to have a person waiting in the wings if something were to happen to the town manager. That, to me, is just not reason enough. The chair has continually praised the town department heads at their skill levels. I agree. That is the reason that they ran the department so well for the months that the town manager was out. They are highly skilled, and they have hired highly skilled staff, so things ran well. For a day, a week, or 2 weeks, a current department head can be the designated interim town manager. That is the part that has been missing, and it makes good sense to have a person that can easily step in. I totally support the idea that you have someone who can absolutely stand in for this person. It's what companies do, it's what good towns do. But just because other towns have assistant town managers and have combined HR with that role is not reason enough. HR needs to stand on its own. Despite what legal counsel has stated, that is their opinion, and that should be considered in the overall data that this board looks at. This is risk management. Risk management is deciding how much liability a town is willing to take on, and so you would balance those out. And lastly, I would just say that continuing the HR duties with the role of assistant town manager is not simply solved by signing a confidentiality agreement. In this role, in a town of this size with a number of employees, HR needs to be dedicated to the often complex tasks of employee relations. So lastly, I will just close with I would like some information about the justification of this role, as I did ask in the last meeting. And again, why can't this go through the budget process? What is the hurry? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sermon. Thank you, Mr. Campbell. I'll try to address your questions globally because some of it has some overlap. Starting, Mr. Campbell, you asked about the duties of a full-time HR director currently, as well as an assistant. Since the assistant was brought on, I want to say that was budget year 2018. That was the last year I chaired the BRC. The request was for a full-time HR assistant, and that was creating a new position. And the BRC did some due diligence and decided that they would start out with a part-time. The recommendation, and remember, it was a recommendation to the Select Board. The Select Board at that time is the one that voted in the approval of that budget line. I recall vividly the discussion that the BRC undertook in 2018, and I think that the majority of the committee at that time felt compelled to recommend a full-time. We thought that the work was there, but that it would start out as a part-time and see where it went from there. Since that time, it's been difficult to keep a person in that role, and subsequently the HR director has assumed, a lot of that responsibility. With that, the town manager has worked with some of the other departments, and in terms of some of the day-to-day operations, particularly including finance, and Mr. Dean, you can jump in and elaborate further, but I'm just going to give you an overall summary that some of the other day-to-day operations that would include payroll have now been designated to other folks, okay? With the retirement of the HR director and understanding of Ms. Sermon, now I'm going to jump over to one of you. I'm going to go back and forth because I'm going to tell a story. I'm told I'm good at that. When Mr. Dean went out on leave, which was unexpected, the first thing the board looked at is, well, what's the succession plan? And there was no succession plan. Nothing had ever been set up. And we looked at who we could tap internally. There was also the opportunity to go externally. There are town managers out there who are either retired or in between jobs that can come in on an interim basis and do that. Now, we all have something that we bring to the board, much like you had something to bring to the board when you respectfully served. One of the things I bring to the board is I work with 350 municipalities. And I've seen large, medium, and small. I've seen some real well-run organizations, and I've seen some poorly run organizations. And I understand that the municipalities I work with are across the border in Massachusetts. But at the end of the day, an organization is an organization. Some of these interim town managers are either, if they're retired and they were really good, they're really expensive, or frankly, there's a reason some of them are out of work. So we looked internally, and any of our department heads could have served the function of interim town manager. However, and particularly this year, remember, we were still in the middle of a pandemic, and our department heads have been strained over the last 15 months. Their staffs have been strained. We took that into consideration. Who could we take away from their respective departments to step in and leave other staff, all of whom are good and all of them that could step up to the work, but you'd really be leaving that particular department void. Number two, we looked at who we could find that was a neutral figure. And fortunately, we had somebody that we could tap who stepped in, and Ms. Sermon is absolutely correct. The department heads and the respective staff stepped up. They went above and beyond. They were fully supportive of the select board, and they were also fully supportive of the interim town manager, who came in here and kept Mr. Dean's seat warm until he got back. And she worked hard every day. The department heads gave her the respect that she earned while doing the job, working nights, working weekends, doing everything she could. So Ms. Sermon's right. We have the resources, and we have one heck of a staff here, but we had, fortunately, an individual that could step into that office. As you both know, that's not an easy office. And the responsibilities, since Mr. Dean was hired, have grown. The town has grown. I don't mean in population, but the needs and structure of the town and this organization have grown. The responsibilities have increased. Ms. Sermon's looking for some quantification. Mr. Dean's doing his job, and he's doing his job well, and anybody that serves in the town manager's job, I'm using him as an example because he's sitting here, okay? But he could be serving this town a lot better if he had an assistant town manager under him to whom he could delegate certain responsibilities, certain projects, and that person could assume the HR director's role on the high-level HR operations while the assistant handled the day-to-day work, now that we have a reliable assistant. And Mr. Campbell, you're right. You're right. Right now, this is funded in the budget, give or take $1. It's funded. That's not to say that the BRC could receive a request this year or next year if it's decided that, hey, we may want to take a look at that assistant's role. I don't know that that's the case. And I don't know, whether or not that the workload would be as such that we'd need that. So you're right. There's a chance in the future. just like this year when the IT director came at the 11th hour with the request for an assistant. And we had said that we were not going to add personnel this year because of the pandemic. Well, the select board did add personnel when the IT director said, we're not going to be able to serve our town if we don't get some help in here. And that happens. It may happen this year, it may happen next year. I don't know. That's not the plan on the table right now. But you're right. That very well could happen. I'm going to respectfully request that we agree to disagree and that we disagree agreeably. I don't find this to be an added position. There's not any extra added money. When the Budget Recommendations Committee, when I sat on it anyway, and albeit it was for 3 years, okay, anytime we looked at a new position, as it were, it was because it was an added position that didn't exist for increased money. This is neither. Precedent was set a few years ago within the police department, in the DPW Water and Sewer Department, and just this year upon the retirement of Chief Como, when the fire department reorged. It's not adding a position, certainly not an economic developer. When you're adding a position such as that, I would expect that it would have been vetted like it was. I look at that, and again, we can agree to disagree. I look at that as apples and oranges. I don't think it's the same thing, respectfully. Again, precedent has been set. It's a reorganization. It's an attempt to make this organization better, to serve our staff better, and to serve the public better. I think I got all of the questions answered there. Or if not, I can add more. I'd also like the rest of the board to speak.
Mr. Chairman, sorry. I was just going to say, I know Bill had asked the question about the slotting at grade 13 and asked about the review of that, and that's actually done by Human Resources, so that's where it comes from.
So our current
I'll also,
resources-
go ahead.
Our current Human Resources recommend.
Reviewed this position. Also, the Human Resources Director in its current state was actually on board for a reclassification as well, because that position is actually one of our lowest paid department heads, and it's really askew from where it should be.
Yeah, good point.
So just wanted to make those points.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
I just want to add, I completely agree with everything you've said, Chairman. The only thing that I think I agree with both of you on is in terms of transparency. I think we could have done a better job at being transparent about the full conversation that was going to take place, so people were fully aware that this was possibly a decision that was going to be made at the time. In regards to, was this the right decision and were we proposing something that was necessary? Absolutely. Especially after the year that we've had and looking at all of the departments and what everyone has had to sort of rally around and the amount of work that each department head and their assistants have had to take over was astronomical. Like, I just don't know how DPW, the fire department, police handled everything that they did with the baseline of what their work was for the year, and it sort of exposed our needs. And what it did expose was our needs also in home base here at the town offices. So I do understand why there's a hesitation to, adding new positions and more money, but I have no hesitation at all personally from what I've seen and the work that's been done, that it's absolutely necessary for our town, the size of our town, the needs of our town, and town members. So,
Good, thank you. Selectwoman Cowan.
I'll hold my comments till the end.
Selectwoman Gilman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf. She's very eloquent in explaining an opinion. I see this job and the job description as heavy on the human resources, as it should be, and that the work of the assistant town manager is sort of a town manager in training. So it's not you don't drop human resources to do something in place of the town manager unless it's immediate need. It's somebody who's going to be ready and may practice on occasion, but definitely the human resources aspect is the most important to me. But having the backup, and this is really the only kind of place to put it, and it works together well, I think, because it's all dealing with personnel. And the town manager oversees all of our personnel, and including the HR director. And so that position, I think, can, as an assistant town manager, has the readiness to do the duties, will do some to stay, up on what's going on in the town, but their main duty is going to be the human resources aspect, because that's what we need.
Selectman Brown?
I'm in support of all the comments that have been made so far. I just wanted to help tighten up our language a little bit. So our memo here talks about headcount neutral, and you mentioned the phrase neutral role. So if we could just tighten that up a little bit, where by neutral role, you're referring to the HR aspect of this position. So headcount neutral, sort of the budget impact here, but neutral role, I wasn't sure, do we mean the HR aspect, where this is a person who's neutral as far as HR issues go, or was it still that headcount neutral idea?
Well, I think it's both, obviously on the HR part, but also if you are, the assistant town manager, as the town manager stands neutral relative to department needs.
Okay.
That individual would also have that neutral role.
That's what I thought you meant.
Yeah, you said that better than I did.
It's actually right in the statute that the town manager serves without preference to qualification or politics or anything like that. So there's a neutrality that flows from the position down.
And much like the HR director presently, the assistant town manager, HR director would report to Mr. Dean. Not the select board, they'd report to Mr. Dean.
And just to play out that scenario there, so if in the future we had another situation where the town manager were to need to leave immediately and another department head were to fill that role, what kind of compromising of that neutral role would it, what does that expose us to? If we had chosen someone, well, I guess just, does that question make sense at all?
Yeah. No, it does. And I think that's one of the things that we discussed when we were considering, naming an interim is, obviously not taking somebody away from their department, but also bringing somebody in that, for lack of a better word, wasn't championing one department over another. Not that I think that would be done, but we were assured that, this person coming in, was playing with even hand.
Yeah. And having the existing, if we had just replaced the human resources director with a new body and then asked them to stand in, it would be a huge gap between their current skill set, their day-to-day duties, to say you're now the interim town manager. That gap is quite wide, right?
Yeah, and I think, too, the goal that we're trying to set here is, not replacing an HR director fully with an HR director, but also, I think, as like Woman Gilman said, grooming somebody, potentially that could become a town manager, whether it's here or someplace else, but certainly, and that's what you see. You've seen that, and I look at no better example than the gentleman down at the end of the table who started out as an assistant town manager back early in his career. That's when I first met you.
That's true. Yeah, I've actually been an assistant town manager, HR director, personnel director, and an assistant town manager that oversaw community development and human services in my career. So I actually have some direct experience with these hybrid positions and how they work and what the workload is like. So that I can speak to.
And I think you'd make a good mentor.
Thank you.
There's one more question.
Oh, Mr. Campbell? Please.
Just one quick comment. I think that may be a good merging of those positions. My point, the point's been made that this is not going to cost us anything. I'm not worried about the cost so much as the responsibilities and the demands on the job, that you're adding more to it, and I think you really need two people. You need the combination assistant town manager and director of HR and a full-time helper, because that job as HR is a full-time job. I would like you to consider the responsibilities as well as the money.
No, thank you. Did you have anything else, Selectwoman Cowan? Selectwoman Cowan?
I think that this pandemic has shown a lot of resilience in our town, especially from our citizens, our staff, our boards, our volunteers, our members. And it's also showed the cracks where we need to do better, the things that we need to focus on a little bit more. And I think one of those places is allowing some flexibility in restructuring when we see talent, when we realize that there are gaps, and when people request help. I voted for that a couple of times. I voted for that at DPW when there was a reorganization that didn't go before the BRC. I did that for Chief Poulin when he asked for that reorg. And then just in your position, Chief, I voted to support you in that reorganization. And so I feel very comfortable looking at taking what we've learned here in this pandemic, taking where the holes are, and then frankly, taking advantage of a retirement of a really valued town staff member, and then looking at that position and seeing how can we make this fit our needs in this moment right now. And I think that if we were adding a new position, if we were adding an entirely new department, even though Darren is a department of one, he is still a new department, that certainly would need to go through the BRC. The HR person that was requested, it was requested to be a full-time position, and then the BRC decided to request that as a full-time position, and the select board only said, this is going to be a part-time position. So that's an opportunity to look at this structure and then take what we would be creating and actually not add another position at all. We would just be adding the other half part of the part-time position. So I'm actually really excited about this opportunity because I think it'll increase capacity here. We will add somebody who can help Mr. Dean be a better communicator. We've had a lot of discussions as a board about transparency and how we can do things better and communications. And in order to do that well, we have to have talented people with enough time to do that sort of work. And I think that is the best sort of use of our resources, use of our opportunities, use of retirements, and use of a talent. So I would make a motion when you're ready.
Any other discussion from the board?
All right. I will move to approve the classification amendment, adding Assistant Town Manager, Human Resources Director to grade 13, and that would eliminate the Human Resources Director at grade 11.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And last on our discussion item, we have the second of 3 readings, Mr. Dean, correct?
Second of 3, yes.
Okay, and this is to amend the current dog ordinance to the kids' park and the townhouse common.
Right. This ordinance change would add townhouse common and kids' park to parks that do not allow for dogs.
Okay. Any members of the public wish to speak?
Chief? No, he says no.
And this was just as a quick overview, was proffered by the Parks and Rec Department, who, when they renovated Kids Park, found that there were actually more dogs showing up in the Kids Park, doubling as a dog park. So they raised some concerns, rightly so, about that. And then Townhouse Common was something that we always thought did not allow dogs, but was not on the books. So that's why that is here as well.
Great. And the third and final reading will be next Monday?
Be on the 21st, right?
Great. Okay. Moving along to regular business, we do not have any tax abatements, credits, or exemptions. We do not have any permits and approvals. So, Mr. Dean, we can jump right into the town manager's report.
Okay, a couple of things. One is that we are doing a sewer project over at Town Hall, and I heard today from our maintenance superintendent, Jeff Beck, that they were able to televise all of the lines at the Town Hall and found that they were in much worse condition than originally thought. Seems to be a theme with the sewer lines. And I just wanted to report to the board that we had estimated out of the maintenance projects account that that project would be $5,000, and now it's grown to $24,600 as of today. So when the work is being done, it's going to eat quite a bit more of that maintenance projects account. The good news is that there are some significant savings out of a $20,000 project that was geared toward roof repairs at the DPW admin building. They found that that was actually a much lesser scenario than they thought, so we'd be able to at least gain back about $16,000 from that. So there's going to be some trade-offs there, but I did want to let the board know so there weren't any surprises that that project was over budget by quite a bit. All right, we received notice of the ARPA funds being sent to the state of New Hampshire, so there's a webinar on Wednesday for those, so we finally got noticed by the state that those are coming through, which is great news. And committees of conference are meeting this week at the State House, and we're waiting for the final budget action that I know Selectwoman Gilman will report on. We did sign the LCHIP grant application. I know Kristen Murphy had come before you. That is on its way to the LCHIP program, so that was signed today. And then there's a sustainability needs assessment that the committee members worked on with Julie LaBranche, and that is out to departments to fill out.
Can I just interrupt there? It's also on the Sustainability Committee's webpage. There's a survey, that's the word, that everybody should take a look at.
That was actually all I had, so that was perfect timing.
With that, Selectwoman Gilman, I'll let you start with committee reports.
I had a Conservation Commission meeting, and quite frankly, I don't remember what we talked about. It seems like such a long week. Mr. Dean referred to the House bills that are in with the Committee of Conference, which is when the Senate amends a House bill or vice versa, and one body doesn't agree with the amendment that was made to the bill. So a subgroup is assigned by the Speaker and the President of the Senate to negotiate the difference between what they think. So this year there are 46 or 49 bills that are in Committee of Conference, and we will vote on them June 24th. And in the packet is a list of those things, which includes the House bill and House Bill 1, HB 1, and its trailer version, HB 2. And I would recommend, although it is a bazillion pages long, if you go to the General Court website and look for HB 1 and do a word search for your favorite word in that PDF document or HTML, you will find many things that you would not expect to see in a budget. There's a lot of policy that's been put in there, and it's a lot of policy that has been very divisive, and I'm going to use that word, which is actually used in the budget. So all I'm going to say is please go to the General Court website, look at the list that we put in the packet here. It gives you basically the title and a little bit of description. But you have until June 24th, when we all meet again, to send your letters to your representatives and your senators and the governor. And Executive Council, just to let your notice be heard, let your voice be heard.
Thank you.
And tell me too.
Selectman Brown.
Nothing to report.
Nothing to report. Okay. Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
I took last week off, so both the Housing Committee meeting and the Arts and Commissions meeting, the art folks, I missed their meeting. So I'll try to get an update so that next week I can let everyone know what was discussed.
Thank you. Selectwoman Cowan.
Yes, we had a very long planning board meeting on Thursday, what is today, Monday, so a few days ago. We had a continued public hearing, the Grisette application, and then we also there's a continued public hearing on the Carlisle property over on Watson Road. This one is a low-density residential zoning district, and we did approve the yield plan.
How many units did it end up with?
12.
I was just trying to remember what the Conservation Commission saw, because there were some prime wetlands that they'd need to move some buildings around.
Yeah, they did that, and then we just approved the yield plan, so whatever happens post this. It is still in its infancy. We will hear a lot more of this project.
Thank you. And I did not have any committees last week. Correspondence, we have the House bills that Selectwoman Gilman,
Yeah, I wasn't going to read down the
but
list.
she's got more.
I know, but there are a couple that are very pertinent to committees that we have, and one is House Bill 315, which would allow an aggregation of power for renewable energy to generate up to 5 megawatts of power. And when we talked about, or when we voted for the solar array at the transfer station, we projected it would produce 1.75 megawatts. The amendment to this returns to the current limit right now, which is 1 megawatt, which means we have plenty of room but can't use it. And we want you might have to redo our contract. I don't know, but there's always somebody who doesn't want more renewable energy. Where was the other one? Any bill that had to do with affordable housing or housing limits, densifying the built neighborhood, reusing existing structures. Only out of 7, I think we had, only 1 passed. And that one is to create an area like we have called the 79E, where we can give the tax incentives, and we have for downtown when somebody repairs an historic building. This would be the same thing for residential. And it would not be for building new residential, it would be for rehabilitation of an existing building, because that's part of trying to be sustainable and also to enliven your community by keeping what you have and repurposing it. And I could go on. But those were the ones that were important to me that came through my committee and anyway.
Thank you.
Had people on committees ask me about them, so.
But we always appreciate your update from Concord. Thank you. The other correspondence was from Xfinity on regional sport network fees, and also a correspondence from Team requesting that fees be waived, and you can see in the correspondence my response to Mr. Ruffner's that we'll take that up at our meeting on 6/21 under permits and approvals. And with that, reviewing the board calendar, our regularly scheduled meeting is next Monday, the 21st. Mr. Dean and I we tried to go through August, and Russ, I left my calendar at home. Did you write those down?
So the dates I have are July 19th, August 2nd, August 16th, and then a TBD that was maybe August 23rd or August 30th.
And July 12th.
I was going to say, we're only meeting once in July?
July 12th is already posted.
12th is a day, I will not be here on the 12th, I know that.
Yeah, we're going to have to meet anyway because that's going to be a month.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the reason we're taking 3 weeks is because we've gone pretty much every Monday in June, and then the following week is the 4th of July.
So we're not meeting on the 26th?
Of July? No.
Great. And then, Russ, can you say those dates in August again?
So I have August 2nd, August 16th.
Okay.
And then if you go every 2 weeks, it'd be August 30th,
Okay, so not the 23rd.
not the 23rd.
I think we had talked about the 23rd, because I might not be available the 30th.
Oh, I'm not available the 23rd, but you're more.
Okay, well, not really.
It's all right, Daryl and I.
Punt.
You know what, keep it the 30th.
Let's see what business we have
Yeah.
when we get
Yeah, as we
closer.
get closer.
Well, the only thing I'm concerned about is Labor Day is the next week, and we go, if it's the 30th,
When is school back in
the
session?
30th.
Oh. Yeah.
And just the reason that I'm not, my client has an annual board retreat, which they did virtually last year, and right now it's scheduled for virtually, but with everything opening up. But I think I'm comfortable that if it is the 30th and I can't be here,
You could do it virtually.
Vice Chair Cowan can,
I'd be happy
Can do
to.
that.
I would also be happy to not meet that.
So if your virtual board retreat goes live, then you could virtually potentially.
well, if the board retreats virtually, then we'll be done.
Right.
You know, it's down in Cape Cod, so
Don't
I
miss it.
just can't.
Yeah.
I'd rather, to be honest with you, and I said this the first year I was on the board, I'd rather be here.
That's sweet of you.
Don't tell my client, but
You just did.
Yeah, I know.
I'd much rather be here.
You're on TV.
That's okay, they know how I feel. Anything else? Any other comments or anything? We knew this would be a quick meeting, so welcome. And welcome, it's good to be here in person.
Good to see everybody.
Yeah.
But with that, it's time to go home, so I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we stand adjourned. Good night, everyone.
before we all disperse,